The first time I heard the call sign, I was lying in a drainage cut at the bottom of the Gorge with 81 men, a broken platoon radio, and a handset pressed so hard against my ear that I could feel my pulse in it. The voice on the other end was quiet, not calm the way a training room is calm the way a tool is calm when it has been used so many times that nothing about the task surprises it anymore. She said, Bravo 6, this is Pale Dagger. I have your position on IR. I need your friendlies marked north and south before I make my first pass. Confirm I had been a captain for 3 years. I had called for CAS twice before. Both times the voice on the other end had been male, seasoned, and unhurried. This voice was female. 23 minutes after the ambush had collapsed our left flank, and I had not heard her name once in the 3 days since she arrived at FOB, Aldrin and was given a cot in the aviation attachment tent and a seat at the back of every brief. I want to tell you the rest in the right order because that is the only way it makes any sense. She had arrived on a Tuesday on the tail end of a resupply flight, carrying a standard issue kit bag and a flight helmet with a name she had written on the back of the neck pad in black marker. She was 28 years old. She had dark hair cut above the collar, and the kind of quietness that reads, to men who are not paying attention, as having nothing to say. Most of the men in my company were not paying attention. The introduction happened in the staging area on the second morning. Sergeant Major Dunlap ran the company briefs the way he had run them for 9 years, fast, loud, and with the authority of a man who had been right about most things in his adult life. He was right about most things. He was not right about her. He had her name on a slip of paper, and he read it without looking up. We have an aviation attachment rotating in. Warrant Officer Lena Caro, Rotary Wing, here to fly CAS support if the situation calls for it. He set the paper down and looked at the formation. Until the situation calls for it, she will be on standby. Think of her as the babysitter they sent instead of a real gun run. He said it the way men say things they expect to get a laugh, and he got one from most of the 83 men standing in that staging area. She was standing at the edge of the formation, 6 rows back. She did not change expression. She did not look at the ground. She looked at a fixed point ahead of her and waited for the brief to continue. I was standing at the front. I heard it. I did not correct it. I have thought about that decision every day since the night in the Gorge, and I cannot tell you what I was afraid of. I can tell you it was easier to let it land and move on, and I can tell you that easy is sometimes the most expensive choice you make. She came to 2 more briefs and sat at the back and took notes. I walked past her once on the way to the motor pool, and she was reading a topographic printout of the Gorge Road, the elevation lines traced with a fingernail, both flanks marked with small, penciled notations I did not try to read. I thought at the time that she was being thorough. I know now that she was already solving a problem I had not yet been told to worry about. The mission was a route clearance and presence patrol in the Gorge, a 7-kilometer slot canyon with limestone walls that ran steep on both sides and gave the road almost no width. It was the kind of terrain that every experienced soldier looks at and files under move through fast. We did not move through fast. The lead vehicle found a culvert device at marker 4. Engineers came up, and by the time we had the road open again, we had been in the gorge for 41 minutes. They hit us from both ridgelines at once. What happened in the first 4 minutes, I will not describe in full, because some of it is still classified, and the rest of it is not something I put into words without good reason. What I will tell you is that the left flank collapsed. 2 vehicles were disabled, and we lost the ability to move forward or backward on the road. We could cover both walls to our immediate flanks, but the ridgeline shooters were set back far enough that we were not putting effective fire on them. My platoon radio went down in the first minute. I was working on a backup handset and a prayer. The CAS request went up through the TOC at 0151. I did not know who was on standby. I did not think about who was on standby. I gave them our grid, our situation, and our urgent request for rotary wing support, and then I went back to managing 81 men in a drainage cut while the world above the limestone walls went loud. She called in at 0213. 22 minutes for my request to her first radio contact. Bravo 6, this is Pale Dagger. I have your position on IR. I need your friendlies marked north and south before I make my first pass. Confirm. I marked the north end of our position with a strobe and sent Corporal Whites sprinting 60 meters through the drainage cut to drop a second one at the south end. He did it in the dark with men shooting over his head. She waited. She did not hurry me, and she did not fill the radio with noise. When I confirmed both strobes, she said, "Copy. I'm going to work the north ridge first. Keep your heads down and do not move the strobes." Then she was off the frequency and the night above us changed. I had heard gun runs before. The Apache is not a quiet aircraft, and a cast pass at low altitude in a narrow gorge is not a subtle event. The first pass came in from the south, angled toward the north ridgeline in a tight arc that I would not have believed possible for the terrain if I had not been lying in the drainage cut underneath it. She did not make a single straight pass. She worked the angle of the gorge walls, came in under the ridgeline on the west side, and put the gun on the north ridge shooter position from a direction that should not have been available. The ridgeline went quiet, not suppressed, gone. She called back in 20 seconds. North ridge suppressed. I'm repositioning for the south. Confirm your south strobe is still in position. It was. White's was lying on top of it. The south ridge took 2 passes. The first repositioned the shooter, which she said on the radio between passes with the same tone she might use to read a weather briefing. He moved. I see him. Stand by. The second pass ended the problem. Between the 2 passes, she was on the radio telling me exactly what she was doing and why, without drama, without commentary, without anything, except the information I needed to keep my men from moving into her line of fire. The gorge had 2 secondary firing positions we had not confirmed at the time of the ambush, a lower shelf on the east wall, and a draw at marker 6, where a third element had set up to cover the road in case we tried to push forward. She found both of them without me telling her they existed. I do not know how she found the shelf. I asked her later, and she said she had studied the topographic printout and identified it as a likely secondary position 3 days before the mission, and that when the initial ambush lit up the ridgelines, she had noted the absence of fire from the shelf and understood it as a weapon being held in reserve. I stood in front of her when she said that, and I could not think of a single useful response. I stood there for 4 seconds, and then I said, I see. She said, yes, sir, and looked back at her maintenance log. She held the gorge for 3 hours and 11 minutes, 4 gun runs, 2 primary ridge positions, 1 secondary shelf, 1 draw, in the dark in a slot canyon with walls that gave her less than 100 meters of lateral clearance on her tightest pass. She did it in an aircraft that had been on an extended sortie before our request came in and was running on what should have been return fuel by her second pass. She did not mention the fuel state until after the 4th run, and even then she mentioned it the way you mention a minor scheduling constraint. She extracted herself from the area when the QRF arrived at marker 2 and the situation was no longer kinetic. Her last radio transmission to me was, Bravo 6 Pale Dagger. QRF has visual on your position. You're good. Out. Not good luck. Not glad you made it. Just the facts of the situation. Stated clean, and then she was gone. The company walked out of the Kellern Gorge at 0552. 81 men. 2 vehicles lost. 4 wounded. None killed. The battalion surgeon told me later that the suppression timeline was the difference. 11 more minutes of fire from those ridgelines, and we would have been having a different conversation. The after-action brief was at Eero 800. I was the ranking officer in the room when Captain Vales from Battalion S2 read the flight record. He was going through the standard CAS debrief items, call sign, sortie time, ordnance expended, and he got to the pilot file section and he paused. He did not pause the way a man pauses when he is unsure of a fact. He paused the way a man pauses when a fact surprises him. Pale Dagger, he said, mostly to himself, then to the room. Warrant Officer Caro's full designation is CW3 Lena Caro. She has 11 years of rotary wing combat service across 3 theaters. She is a 2-time Air Medal recipient. Her flight record shows 41 CAS missions, 19 of which were rated complex terrain. He turned a page. She was posted to FOB Aldrin on a 2-week attachment rotation. Prior to this assignment, she held the slot at 2nd Aviation Regiment, Eastern Theater, for 4 years. He set the page down. Her call sign is Pale Dagger. She has been using it since her 2nd combat deployment. The room was about quiet for a moment. Sergeant Major Dunlap was sitting 2 chairs to my left. I did not look at him. I looked at the briefing packet in front of me, and I sat with what I had just heard. 41 CAS missions, 11 years, the Babysitter. She was not at the after-action brief. By the time we assembled in that room, she had filed her sortie record, completed her post-flight inspection, and gone to the maintenance tent to help the crew chief on a recurring hydraulic issue that had been logged 3 times and not resolved. The crew chief told me this later. He also told me that she had identified the root cause in 20 minutes and had written it up in the maintenance log in terms clear enough that he could fix it himself. He had not known who she was until Vales read the file. Afterward, he said, he went back and read the log entry again, and it read the same as it had before, clean, direct, exactly sufficient, and he kept the page. I went to find her that afternoon. She was in the aviation attachment tent, sitting on her cot with the topographic printout spread across her knees, marking what I now understood were the secondary and tertiary firing positions of every approach route within 15 kilometers of the fob. She looked up when I came in. She did not stand, because I had not made it an official visit, and she read that correctly. I told her what I should have said in the staging area. It took me longer than it should have. I am not a man who apologizes well, and she did not make it easier by pretending that the thing I was apologizing for had not happened. She heard me out, and when I finished, she said, "I know what I know, Captain. I don't need a room to know it." She said it without heat, the way you state a bearing. Then she went back to the map. I have run briefings differently since that morning in the gorge. When an attachment joins my element, aviation, medical, intelligence, any specialty, I read their file before I open my mouth, not a summary, the file. I know their record, their call sign, their theater experience, and their last 3 missions before they walk into my staging area. I brief them by name and record in front of the formation the first morning, every time. I do not know if she ever knew I changed the habit. She rotated out of Fob Aldrin 4 days after the gorge. We did not have a formal departure. I watched her load her kit bag onto the resupply aircraft from across the flight line. She lifted it the way she did everything, efficiently and without ceremony. The crew chief who fixed the hydraulic issue framed the maintenance log entry. It's on the wall of the avionics tent at Fob Aldrin right now, behind a strip of clear plastic, and it reads the same as any other log entry she ever wrote. Just the problem, the diagnosis, the fix, and the date. She did not sign it with anything other than her name. That is the whole of what she left behind there. A clean log entry, a gorge that let 81 men walk out, and a captain who finally learned to read the file before he forms an opinion.